The cavern of rebirth did not like to be watched. Seren Arvale felt it in the way the air tightened around her, as if the mountain itself were drawing a breath and holding it. The chamber's basalt walls glimmered faintly with veins of emberstone, pulsing in time with the slow, distant thud of the Aetherflow beneath her feet. She stood in the circle inscribed generations ago, concentric rings of sigils carved into the stone and inlaid with silver, the lines filled with ash from 100 past rebirths. At the very center lay the nest, a broad basin of obsidian, smoothed by the passage of centuries and the weight of feathers and flame. It was empty. It should not have been empty. Seren tightened her grip on her staff until the carved ridges bit into her palm. The omens were precise, she murmured, though there was no one to hear. Her voice felt thin in the cavern, easily swallowed. Solstice, third bell before dawn, the phoenix always returns. Always. Her teachers had repeated that word often, as if saying it enough times would make it true forever. Always the phoenix rises. Always the keeper waits. Always the balance holds. Hot light flickered along the emberstone veins, then dimmed again, like a heartbeat that had missed a step. Seren inhaled slowly, deliberately. The scent of old ash and heated stone filled her lungs, familiar and grounding. It was not the first time she had waited alone in the rebirth chamber. The last keeper, Master Vera, had allowed her to stand at the edges as an apprentice, watching the blaze flare and condense into a bird of impossible beauty. Seren still remembered the way that phoenix had looked at her then, eyes like molten gold, head cocked, as if measuring the worth of the girl who might someday guard it. You are keeper now, she reminded herself. You do not flinch. You do not doubt. She lifted her free hand, tracing a small glyph in the air, a spiral opening outward like an unfurling wing, and murmured a spell under her breath. Pale light gathered at her fingertips, flowing outward to touch the silver-inlaid lines. They awakened, one by one, with a faint glow. The outermost ring responded, then the next. Seren felt the spell take hold, a gentle tug downward. Her life heat shifted, coolness pricking her skin as magic answered her call. Aether, show me, she whispered. The nest remained empty. The mountain answered instead. A low, resonant moat swelled through the stone, rising beneath her boots. The emberstone veins flared brighter, no longer a heartbeat, but a warning. The air thickened with the scent of smoke, though nothing yet burned. Seren lowered her hand and extinguished the spell. The light faded from her fingertips. A drop of chill rolled down her spine, gathering between her shoulder blades. The phoenix would return. It had to. Without it, the Aetherflow would fray and fracture, and the Dawncrest peaks would dissolve into storms and earthquakes. Without it, magic itself might twist out of shape, unless the omens were wrong. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling Erwin's careful script on the last letter. The cycles have shortened by a fraction. The Aetherflow pulses unevenly. We must trust tradition, Seren, but we must not go blind to change. The memory did not soothe her. A faint tremor shivered through the chamber. Emberstone flashed white-hot, all at once. Seren's eyes snapped open. The nest was no longer empty. A single spark hovered above the obsidian basin, trembling like a candle flame in a draught. It was barely bigger than her thumbnail, yet its radiance painted the entire cavern in gold. Ash motes lifted from the carvings and whirled around it in a lazy spiral. Seren exhaled, her chest loosening. There you are, she breathed. The tension she'd held so tightly eased just enough for her hand to shake. The spark pulsed, as if replying. The air grew hotter, heavy with the tang of ozone. Sigils carved into the walls flared to life. absorbing and redirecting the fiery light, sheltering the mountain from being hollowed out by the phoenix's return. The spark elongated, stretching into a slender ribbon of flame, then curled back upon itself, forming the outline of a wing. Another wing, a tail, a beak. Seren's heart stuttered. She had seen this before, when she was a girl, the shape of a bird emerging from raw fire, each feather a stroke of molten gold. This time the flames twisted. The outline of wings collapsed inward, contorting. The blazing form loosened, fire streaming downward like a waterfall. The nest brimmed with light, overflowing, molten radiance spilling over the sides, without heat or harm. "Steady," Seren whispered, though she did not know which of them she was instructing. The Aetherflow roared in her bones, heat pressed against her skin, tears sprang to her eyes from the brilliance. She lifted her staff and traced a second glyph in the air, this one a containment loop. But the magic faltered as the flame changed again. It drew together, not like a bird coalescing, but like metal poured into a mold. The light shrank, compressed, folding in on itself, until it was no larger than a human body curled in sleep. A shock of unease went through Seren. "No," she said softly. The blaze dimmed, from blinding to bearable, revealing a shape lying in the nest. Smoke drifted upward in lazy spirals. Emberstone veins returned to their steady pulse. Seren's fingers tightened around her staff hard enough to make her knuckles ache. The Phoenix of Dawncrest was not a bird of legend. It was a young man. He lay on his side in the basin, curled as if still in an egg that had vanished. Dark hair clung damply to his forehead, shot through with subtle copper threads that glowed faintly in the ember light. His skin held an inner warmth, as though a thin layer of fire lived just beneath the surface. His bare chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths. A tendril of steam puffed from his lips. Seren did not move. She had read of many rare occurrences in the annals of the Keepers. There were records of double rebirths, of delayed returns, of partial manifestations in storm form, all meticulously annotated and underlined in Erwin's sharp hand. There was no mention of this. The young man inhaled sharply, then coughed, drawing in his first ragged breath as if the air itself surprised him. His hand flexed against the obsidian, fingers splaying wide. Heat rippled outward from his touch, making the carved ash glow. His eyes opened. They were not human eyes, at least not entirely. Gold flared in the irises, not a simple color, but a depth, as if someone had melted sunlit metal and poured it into the shape of sight. For a heartbeat, looking into them felt like staring directly into the center of the nest at the moment of rebirth. Seren's pulse raced in her throat. The young man squinted as if the dim cavern were too bright. Then he looked at her. They regarded each other in silence. He blinked first. "Well," he rasped, his voice rough but oddly warm, "this is new." Seren's training finally stirred through her shock. "Do not move," she commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "You are within a consecrated circle. Any sudden disruption could—" "Explode?" he guessed, pushing himself up on one elbow anyway. "Turn me into a pile of ash? Turn you into a pile of ash?" The corner of his mouth crooked up. "Seems a bit rude after I've just arrived." He moved with the loose, fluid grace of someone who trusted their body without yet understanding its limits. When he tried to sit fully upright, dizziness caught him. He wobbled and braced both hands against the basin's edge. Seren stepped forward on instinct, then stopped herself a fraction too late. She was not supposed to enter the nest until she had completed the rites. She had not prepared for this. "Do you know where you are?" she asked, voice low. He frowned, looking past her at the sigils glowing on the walls, at the emberstone, at the narrow tunnel that led up to the surface.
His gaze returned to her face, lingering a moment too long. "I know that I am quite naked in front of a very serious woman with a very large staff," he said. "So unless this is some unusual greeting custom, I would say no." Heat rose to Seren's cheeks before she could stop it. She reminded herself firmly that her duty did not allow for embarrassment. "You stand, or lie, within the rebirth chamber of Dawncrest. This is the sacred nest." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You emerged from the phoenix's flame." He looked down at himself as if expecting feathers. "Did I?" he murmured.
Then, more brightly, "That explains the lack of clothing, and the dramatic entrance. I had a feeling I was important." He said it lightly, but there was something searching in his gaze when he looked back up at her, as if hoping she would confirm it. Seren drew herself to her full height, though she knew she did not cut a particularly imposing figure. Dark hair braided in a single plait down her back, practical gray-blue robes belted at the waist, a faint burn scar curling around her right wrist like a bracelet. The scar prickled now, as if reacting to him. "I am Seren Arvale," she said, "Phoenix Keeper of the Dawncrest Peaks. I am sworn to protect the phoenix that maintains our realm's balance." He studied her, head tilted. "And do you see a phoenix here?" he asked quietly. The question landed between them like a dropped stone. Seren's fingers brushed the scar at her wrist. The mark had appeared years ago during a rebirth ceremony, when the phoenix's wingtip had grazed her skin. The bond had been accepted. She had never doubted what lay at the center of the nest. Until now. "The phoenix is flame given form," she answered carefully. "Its rebirth stabilizes the Aetherflow. Its wings encircle our land. She hesitated. "What I see is not what I expected." He laughed softly. The sound was like a crackling hearth, unsteady but warm. "I'll try not to take offense." He shifted again, and the emberstone veins brightened in response, pulsing at the same rhythm as his heart. The ash in the carvings shivered with each of his movements. Magic responded to him. Seren's doubts shimmered, but did not dissolve. "What is your name?" she asked. He opened his mouth, glanced down at his own hands, stared at the faint trails of smoke drifting from his fingertips, and stilled. The humor left his expression, replaced by something sharp and lost. He swallowed, throat working. "It was on the tip of my tongue a moment ago." Seren waited. The cavern seemed to lean in. "I know I am not ordinary," he said slowly. "I can feel that much. There's fire under my skin. There are echoes." His brow furrowed. "But when I reach for anything more than that, it's as if I'm stretching toward a word in a language I've never heard. No memory, no name." A chill settled beneath Seren's ribs. "Amnesia," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Is that what this world is? Is that why everything in my bones feels wrong and right at the same time?" He was studying her now, as if she might be a clue written in flesh. Seren exhaled slowly. "You emerged from the phoenix's rebirth," she said. "Until I know otherwise, I must assume you are tied to it, or are it." Her mind brushed against the phrase and recoiled. The phoenix had always been a bird in the tales, a radiant creature beyond human pettiness. The idea that it might wear a human shape, speak with a teasing tone, blink when the air felt too bright. Unsettling. "So you're saying I might be a majestic, eternal creature of living flame?" he said, expression brightening a fraction. "And not simply an exceptionally handsome stranger waking up on pulled stone." Seren's mouth quirked despite herself. "You are certainly something," she conceded. He smiled fully at that, the first real smile, quick and sincere enough to catch her off guard. "Since I apparently need something to be called," he decided, "until my memories bother to return, you may call me—" He paused, testing sounds silently, tasting them in his mouth. "Kaelen," he said at last. "It feels like a name that belongs to me, or close enough." "Kaelen," Seren repeated, letting the sound roll over her tongue like a spell. It fit in a way she could not define. He levered himself up more carefully this time, swinging his legs over the edge of the nest. As his bare feet touched the carved stone floor, the sigils flared brighter, then stabilized, as if recognizing him. The scar on Seren's wrist burned sharp and fast, then faded. Her oath, made years ago, before a plume of golden feathers, tightened in her chest. Keeper and Phoenix, bound. She ought to be afraid. Instead, she felt something far more dangerous, a stirring of relief that she was not, it seemed, entirely alone in this vanished certainty. "Careful," she said. "Your body is newly formed. It will take time to adjust." He stood, a little unsteady, but determined. "If I topple over, will you catch me?" he asked, half joking. "If you topple, you will likely crack your head on consecrated stone and undo every ritual I have performed for the last 8 years," she replied dryly. "So yes, I will catch you." He grinned again, and this time the cavern did not feel quite so unforgiving. Seren reached into a satchel at her side and drew out a folded bundle of fabric. She had brought it as an afterthought, an extra robe, in case the phoenix's flames scorched her own. She held it out across the faintly glowing lines of the outer circle. "Put this on," she instructed. "Rebirth is not an excuse to disregard basic modesty." Kaelen accepted the robe with a small mock-formal bow. "As you command, Keeper." Her cheeks warmed at the title spoken in his voice. She turned away to give him privacy, though she monitored the glyphs at the edges of her vision, gauging their reactions to him. The magic in the chamber did not bristle or recoil. It relaxed. Fabric rustled, accompanied by a soft, muttered complaint. "How many buttons does one garment need?" "It laces, not buttons," Seren corrected. "And if you cannot manage a simple tie, I question how you will handle any of the more complex aspects of existing." "Give me time," he replied. "I've only been a person for, 5 minutes?" "We do not yet know that you are a person," Seren said, but the protest lacked bite. He stepped to her side, now wrapped in the robe. It was slightly too big for him, the hem brushing the tops of his bare feet, sleeves a little long, but it made him seem less fragile, less raw. Only his collarbones and the base of his neck were visible, the skin there faintly warm, as if lit from within. "Better?" he asked. "Acceptable," she said. "We must leave. It is not safe to linger." Kaelen glanced back at the nest. Ash lay in fine lines within the carvings, undisturbed. No feathers, no charred remains, no comforting signs of a cycle completed as it always had been. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Seren said, turning toward the tunnel that led upward, "I inform my mentor that everything we know is wrong." They ascended the narrow path in single file, the air cooling as they climbed. The walls here were rougher, less tended. Only occasional glyphs marked their way, glowing gently as Seren passed her fingers near them. She did not need their light. She had walked this path enough to know every bend. But they calmed her. Behind her, Kaelen's footsteps were soft, and now and then she heard a quiet intake of breath when he brushed against a stone or caught sight of a faint shimmer of the Aetherflow through cracks. "Will the world look familiar?" he asked. "I do not know," she admitted. "Does the word Dawncrest stir anything in you?" He thought for a moment. "Dawn feels right," he said. "Crest makes me picture a wave rather than a mountain, or maybe a feather." He shrugged. "Nothing clear, just impressions." "And Phoenix?" she tried. A flicker went through him that she felt more than saw, like a heat shimmer in the air. "Yes," he said softly, "that word feels like home, and grief, and coming back when I am tired of returning." He frowned. "I did not know I could be tired of something I cannot remember doing." Seren slowed a fraction, glancing back at him over her shoulder. His expression was distant, as if he were listening to a voice only he could hear. "You will remember," she said. "We will find a way." He gave her a crooked smile. "You sound very sure." "I have to be," she replied. "If I allow doubt, it will root itself in every decision, and we will both fall." He studied her as they continued upward. "You carry the weight of many things," he observed quietly. Seren's hand brushed her scar again. "It is my duty." "That does not answer whether you want it." She did not respond. The question had no place here, between stone and rising light.
The tunnel opened at last onto the mountainside. Cool air rushed in, a sharp, pine-scented breeze that stole the heat from Seren's cheeks. The dawn sky stretched wide above them, streaked lavender and rose, the sun still hidden behind jagged peaks. Below, the valleys unfolded in layered ridges, mist clinging to the lower slopes like lingering dreams. Kaelen stepped past her, eyes widening. "This," he breathed, "I like." He tilted his face toward the horizon, drawing in a breath as if trying to inhale the entire sky. The robe fluttered around his ankles in the wind. Light caught the hidden threads of copper in his hair. Seren watched him for a heartbeat longer than she intended. The phoenix she had known as a girl had filled the sky with wings, its cry a ringing note that had left her ears buzzing for hours. She had been awed, terrified, exhilarated. This new form did not blot out the sun, did not cast shadows across the valley. Yet when Kaelen smiled at the sight of his first dawn, something in the air shifted, subtle but real. The wind gusted, stronger, carrying the scent of warm stone and distant rain. The emberstone veins in the cliff face behind them brightened, as if the mountain were leaning toward him. The world was already reacting to his presence. Seren's sense of unease deepened. Change on this scale never came without consequences. A hawk cried overhead, circling once before sweeping away toward the eastern ridges. Below, near the tree line, a flicker of metal caught her eye, a reflection of sunlight on something not natural. She narrowed her gaze. Riders traced a path along the lower slopes, cloaks snapping behind them. Too far to see their faces, but not too far to notice the way they moved, disciplined, purposeful. Their horses wore dark armor that swallowed light. The banner at their head fluttered in the wind, its emblem unmistakable even at a distance, a stylized serpent coiled around a broken sun. Drevenor. Seren's breath hitched softly. Kaelen followed her gaze. "Friends of yours?" he asked lightly. "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. They should not be this close to Dawncrest, not without sending word, not on that path. On what path? "The one," she said, each syllable heavy, "to the lower mouth of the rebirth chamber." Kaelen's fingers flexed at his sides, and faint wisps of steam curled from his skin in the cool air. "They're hunting something," he said. He did not sound uncertain. "They are hunting you," Seren replied. He tore his gaze from the distant riders to look at her. The wind lifted stray strands of his hair. For the first time since he had opened his eyes, the teasing light in him dimmed, replaced by something sharper. "You're sure?" "The Drevenorians have coveted the Phoenix's power for generations," she said. "If they sense any instability in the Aetherflow, they will come to investigate. If they discover that the Phoenix is newly reborn and vulnerable—" She did not finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Kaelen looked down at his hands, then back at the riders. "I don't remember them," he said, "but I don't like them." That, at least, Seren murmured, is a useful instinct. The riders crept closer, weaving among boulders and scrub, careful to keep to the shadowed side of the slope where they would be harder to see from the main towers of Dawncrest. This was not a diplomatic patrol. This was a hunt. Seren's mind raced through possibilities, each rejected as soon as it formed. She could not confront them alone without revealing Kaelen. She could not return him to the rebirth chamber. The lower entrance would be too near their path. She could not simply run and hope. The Drevenorians were known for their trackers. Erwin's tower rose in her thoughts, farther west, hidden amid peaks and storm-wreathed passes, shielded by misdirection glyphs older than the current empires. If anyone could explain what had happened, it would be Erwin. If anywhere was safe, it would be there. But reaching it would require open ground, with a man who did not yet know the limits of his own strength. "Seren," Kaelen said quietly. She looked at him. "What do we do?" he asked. It was a simple question. It settled on her shoulders with the weight of all her oaths. She lifted her staff, tracing a small concealment glyph in the air. The symbol sank into the rock beneath their feet, and the light seemed to bend around them, dulling their silhouettes against the cliff face. "We leave," she said, "now, before they get any closer." "Where?" "To someone who might understand what you are," she said, "and how to keep you out of their hands." Kaelen watched the riders for a heartbeat longer. "You're not going to hand me over in hopes they'll leave your mountains in peace." His tone was light, but his eyes were steady on her face. Seren met his gaze. The scar on her wrist burned with remembered flame. Keeper and Phoenix, bound. "My oath is to protect the Phoenix," she said, "whatever form it takes." His shoulders eased, almost imperceptibly. "All right," he said. "Then I'll try not to make your life more difficult than it already is." "Good," she replied, "because my life is already quite difficult." He laughed softly, the sound edged with nerves, and stepped closer to her, close enough that she could feel the faint warmth radiating from him in the chill mountain air. "Stay close," she told him. "Do not draw attention, and under no circumstance should you let your inner fire flare where anyone can see. Stay close, be quiet, don't set anything on fire," he summarized.
"That seems manageable. For you, I am not certain," Seren said. He gave her a quick, unabashedly bright grin. "You wound me, Keeper." She did not answer, but something in her chest, something tightly coiled for years, shifted. Below, the Drevenor riders continued their steady approach toward the lower mouth of the rebirth chamber. Seren turned away from them and led Kaelen along a narrow, seldom-used mountain path that only keepers and their mentors knew. As she walked, the mountain's pulse thrummed beneath her feet, and the Aetherflow hummed in her bones, subtly unsteady. The Phoenix had reborn as a man with no memory. The rival empire was already on the move, and Seren Arvale, who had always believed her path was as straight and unbending as a staff, stepped into a future she no longer recognized, with a stranger of fire at her side. Mist clung to the mountain path as Seren and Kaelen descended through the narrow switchbacks, the world still wrapped in early dawn quiet. The path was rarely used, half overgrown in places, shielded by jagged outcroppings and thorny brush, but Seren's steps were sure. Kaelen followed close behind her, moving with surprising grace for someone experiencing legs for the first time. He wasn't silent, though. "How far is this mentor of yours?" he asked, stepping over a fallen branch and then lightly kicking a pebble off the path just to watch it bounce. "If she's halfway down the mountain, I should warn you, I have no idea if I can walk for hours. For all we know, I was a sedentary creature before this." Seren cast him a sidelong look. "You are managing well enough." "That sounds like praise," Kaelen said brightly. "From you, I suspect that's rare." "I praise when praise is earned," she replied, pushing aside a shoulder-high shrub. "So rare." She didn't bother dignifying that with a response, but the faint upward curve of his mouth suggested he'd noticed the twitch at the corner of hers. They moved steadily downward until the path widened into flat ground carpeted in soft pine needles.
Seren stopped to listen, her hand lifting in warning. Kaelen stilled immediately. Only wind whispered through the branches. But a thin pulse of energy rippled through the Aetherflow beneath them, faint, erratic. "Magic," Kaelen murmured, his brow furrowing. "It feels off." Seren nodded once. "Drevenor trackers. They use siphoned life heat to bolster their spells. It creates instability in the Aetherflow." Kaelen winced as if the explanation physically pained him. "That sounds wrong. As if someone is scraping against—" He tapped his sternum. "This, here." "That is because the phoenix anchors the Aetherflow," Seren said. "If you are tied to it, the disruption would affect you." His expression tightened. "If I am tied to it?" "Yes," she admitted quietly.
She tried not to let doubt creep into her voice, but she failed. "We cannot make assumptions. Until you remember, or until Erwin determines otherwise, we must consider all possibilities." "Except handing me over," Kaelen said lightly, though his gaze searched her face. "Except that," Seren confirmed. He smiled, small but real. Then he straightened, adjusting the robe as though preparing for something important. "Lead on." Seren resumed her pace, but her mind churned. The Drevenor hunters were more brazen than she'd expected. For them to approach so close, so quickly, she might have hours at best before they discovered signs of the rebirth. She needed answers before then. They continued westward until the mountains receded enough for a glimpse of the sprawling valley below. Pine forests, a ribboning stream, and far beyond the faint outline of Erwin's tower perched among low-lying clouds. Kaelen stepped up beside her, his breath catching softly. "It's beautiful." "Erwin chose the location for its isolation," Seren said. "Few know the way." "Well," Kaelen murmured, "I'm glad one of us does." They started down the slope, but before they'd gone far, Seren sensed the shift, an abrupt, sharp spike in the Aetherflow that made her teeth ache. She froze. Kaelen nearly bumped into her. "What?" Quiet. The air stilled. A heartbeat later, the bushes ahead rustled. Seren's hand snapped to her staff. Kaelen tensed. A rabbit darted out, then immediately fled the other direction, its fur singed at the edges. Kaelen blinked. "Is wildlife normally crispy?" "No," Seren said. A second rustle followed, heavier, intentional. Kaelen whispered, "Another rabbit?" "Not unless the rabbit wears metal boots." The undergrowth parted. 2 Drevenorian hunters emerged, cloaks dark as ink, armor marked with that same coiled serpent insignia. Their eyes swept the path, sharp, assessing. One carried a short-bladed spear, etched with siphon glyphs. The other held a tracking talisman, pulsing with faint red light. Seren pulled Kaelen with her behind a boulder, just before the hunters' gazes lifted. "Stay low," she breathed. Kaelen crouched, gripping the edge of the rock. Heat shimmered faintly around his hands. Seren pressed her palm over his, steadying him. His warmth leapt up her arm like a spark. "Do not draw on your fire," she whispered. "Even a flicker could reveal us." He swallowed hard and forced his breath slow. The hunters paused directly before their hiding place. "Residual flare readings," the one with the talisman said. His voice was low, clipped. "Stronger than anything we've seen before." "The Phoenix's rebirth signature?" the other asked. "Possibly. Or whatever knocked out our scouts near the lower entrance." Seren's pulse stuttered. Scouts! They were moving faster than expected. The hunter lifted the talisman higher. "The trail goes west. If it is the Phoenix, it's moving on foot." The spear-bearer snorted. "Or it's gone feral. Either way, we deliver it to Drevenor." Kaelen trembled, not in fear, but in anger. Heat gathered beneath Seren's palm again, like coals shifting. She pressed harder. "Steady," she urged silently. Once the hunters moved on, their footsteps fading into the trees, Seren released the breath she had been holding. Kaelen slowly unclenched his fingers. Smoke curled faintly from the ground where his hand touched it. "Sorry," he muttered. "You controlled it," Seren said softly.
That is what matters. But I nearly revealed us with a temper flare. I didn't know I could do that. That, she replied, is why we must reach Irwin quickly. They waited until the hunter's presence vanished from the Aetherflow, then resumed moving, though far more cautiously than before. By midday, the forest had thickened enough that sunlight dappled their faces in shifting patches. Kaelen's steps grew slower. His earlier energy was fading. Even newly reborn, he tired like any mortal. Seren halted near a moss-covered fallen log. "We rest." Kaelen sank onto the log gratefully, exhaling. "Thought I had boundless stamina." "Even the phoenix rests," Seren said. He looked up at her. "You say that as if you know it personally." "I have witnessed the rebirth 6 times," she said. "The phoenix's power burns brightest after transformation, then stabilizes. But those were past cycles, with a bird." She didn't add what she feared. Things were different now. Kaelen let his elbows rest on his knees, staring at his hands. "I can feel something inside me, like embers waiting to catch. But they're unpredictable," he admitted. "When I get angry or scared, they surge. When I'm calm, I can barely sense them." "That aligns with the phoenix's nature," Seren mused. "Emotion strengthens or weakens its fire." He glanced at her, narrowing his eyes. "What emotions strengthen yours?" Seren blinked, caught off guard. "My magic draws from discipline, not emotion." "Not what I asked." "I do not indulge that question," she said, looking away. "Is that because you do not know?" he said gently, "or because you do not want to?" The question struck too close. Seren stood abruptly. "Come, we must continue." But Kaelen rose more slowly this time, his gaze thoughtful, not pressing, simply observant. It made her uneasy. It made her aware. The rest of the journey to the valley floor passed in tense silence. By late afternoon, Irwin's tower finally came into clear view, an elegant spire of pale stone, shaped from a single pillar of rock, runes carved into its sides like frost patterns. Kaelen let out a soft noise of wonder. "That looks like a place where answers live." "It is," Seren said.
But before they could take the final steps across the clearing, a sharp crack of displaced air erupted beside the tower. Seren seized Kaelen's arm and yanked him behind a tree just as a figure stepped into view. White braided hair, crystal lens spectacles, a staff topped with a shard of ice. Irwin Solmeyer. Seren nearly sagged with relief. Kaelen exhaled. "Friend, I assume?" "Yes," Seren said, "and perhaps the only person alive who can help you." They approached cautiously. Irwin turned before Seren spoke, her sharp eyes softening at the sight of her former student. "Seren Arvale," she said, stepping forward. "I felt the Aetherflow lurch. I feared the worst." Seren bowed her head. "It may yet be the worst." Irwin's gaze shifted to Kaelen and froze. The air thickened. Irwin inhaled sharply, magic crackling faintly around her. "That—" She stopped, recalibrated. "No, that cannot be." Kaelen lifted a hand in greeting. "I'm Kaelen, or I think I am. There's some debate." Irwin stared at him as though he were both miracle and catastrophe. "Seren," she said quietly, "bring him inside. Immediately." Inside the tower, the air was scented with parchment, frost herbs, and old spells. Irwin ushered them into a chamber lined with bookshelves and crystalline instruments. She motioned Kaelen toward a runic circle etched on the floor. Kaelen hesitated, glancing at Seren. "It is safe," she assured him. "Stand within it." He did. Irwin murmured a series of invocation glyphs. The runes lit like ice catching sunlight. Kaelen winced, not in pain, but recognition. Energy spiraled upward, wrapping him in a faint glow. His eyes glinted gold for an instant, bright as a dying star. Irwin gasped. "The phoenix!"
she whispered, but changed, fractured, and human. Kaelen let out a weak laugh. Yes, that's what we've been trying to tell ourselves. Irwin circled him slowly. Not merely human. You are woven from fire and life heat, both mortal and immortal. The Aetherflow runs incorrectly through you, as if unsure which path to take. Seren felt a chill. Can he be restored? Irwin looked grim. Perhaps, but if he regains full phoenix form, his humanity will dissolve. Kaelen's posture stiffened. And if he remains human? Seren asked softly. Then the Aetherflow weakens, and Drevenor will sense its vulnerability. Irwin's voice lowered. They will come for him. Kaelen rubbed the back of his neck. They already have. Seren stepped closer to him, instinctively placing herself slightly in front. Irwin noticed. Her expression softened. This complicates everything, she said gently. Your bond, it is forming more quickly than I anticipated. Seren stiffened. Bond? Kaelen blinked. Bond? Irwin sighed. The Keeper's mark reacts to the phoenix.
But with him in human form, the connection manifests differently. Emotional proximity strengthens it. Physical proximity intensifies it. If you remain close, the bond will deepen. Kaelen looked at Seren, eyes wide, not in fear, but in something quieter. Is that bad? Seren couldn't seem to draw in a full breath. It is not how the bond usually forms. It is dangerous, Erwin corrected, for both of you. Kaelen swallowed hard. Then what do we do? Before Erwin could answer, a new pulse of magic slammed through the tower, sharp, violent, wrong. Seren staggered. Kaelen gasped, gripping his chest. What is that? Erwin's face drained of color. Drevenor. They've fractured the Aetherflow nearby. They're setting a trap. Seren grabbed her staff. We have to move him, now. Kaelen steadied himself, fire flickering behind his eyes. I won't hide forever. Your fire is unstable, Erwin warned. If you fight, you may burn out your human vessel before remembering anything. Seren turned to Kaelen. You cannot face them, not yet. You must trust us. His jaw tightened. Then, slowly, he nodded. I trust you, he said. Seren's breath caught. It wasn't a vow, but it felt close. Outside, the sky darkened unnaturally as Drevenor's magic bled into the Aetherflow, warping the light. Seren stepped to Kaelen's side, the space between them small enough to feel his warmth. The hunters were coming. Clouds thickened over Erwin's tower as the Aetherflow trembled beneath the earth, vibrating through stone and bone alike. The unnatural pulse came again, sharper this time, like a plucked wire stretched too tight. Seren steadied herself on her staff as Kaelen winced, a faint glow flaring under his skin. Erwin moved swiftly through the chamber, extinguishing arcglyphs, shuttering crystalline devices, drawing protective veils over shelves. They're forcing the Aetherflow to bend, she said, her voice taut with urgency. They can sense me? Kaelen asked, gripping the edge of the runic circle as if the world tilted beneath him. They can sense the imbalance you create, Erwin corrected. Their tactic is crude, but effective. Seren took Kaelen gently by the arm. We're leaving. Erwin nodded. The mountain paths are compromised. You must take the old wind tunnels beneath the ridge. They lead west toward safer ground. Kaelen blinked. Wind tunnels? Abandoned mining shafts, Seren clarified. Dangerous, but hidden. Erwin thrust a leather satchel into Seren's hands. Herb bundles, stabilizing salt, an aether threading spool, and... She hesitated, then produced a small crystalline amulet. It pulsed faintly with soft blue light.
This will mask his magic for a time. Seren slipped the cord over Kaelen's head. The crystal settled at the base of his throat, the glow dimming as it attuned to him. The flickering warmth beneath his skin steadied. Kaelen exhaled in relief. Feels cool. It will fade after a few hours, Erwin warned. Use them well." The tower shuddered as a shockwave rippled through the valley, distant but powerful enough that dust rained from the rafters. Kaelen straightened, alarm flaring in his gold-flecked eyes. "They're close." Seren moved swiftly. "We go, now." Erwin gripped her shoulder before she left the chamber. "Seren," she said quietly, "be mindful of the bond. He will instinctively seek you when his phoenix instincts rise. Proximity stabilizes him, but it also risks deepening your connection beyond duty." Seren pressed her lips together. "I understand." Erwin's gaze softened. "Do you?" Seren turned away before she could answer. Kaelen followed her down the spiral steps, the amulet's glow brushing the walls with a pale shimmer. "That bond she mentioned," he said softly. "Does it frighten you?" "What frightens me," Seren said without looking back, "is what Drevenor will do if they capture you." "That's not what I asked." "No," she agreed, "it isn't." She didn't elaborate. Outside, the world had darkened unnaturally. Clouds churned like smoke, blotting out the sun. The clearing around Erwin's tower crackled with static, the Aetherflow's distortion making the air feel charged, alive and sickened at once. Seren led Kaelen toward a fissure in the rock at the back of the tower grounds. "The tunnels start here." Kaelen peered into the narrow, shadowed opening. "Comforting." "I didn't promise comfort." "No, but you could have lied." "I do not lie." "Well, I'm grateful for that," he said lightly, but his voice held an undercurrent of nerves. Inside the tunnel, the air was cool and damp. The passage sloped downward sharply, forcing them to descend single file. Kaelen's warm presence at Seren's back pushed away the chill but pulled at her focus. "The bond," Erwin had said, "deepens with proximity." Seren forced her mind to the task ahead. A few minutes into the descent, Kaelen spoke softly. "I can feel them behind us." "The hunters? They're magic," he said, tapping his chest. "It feels like siphons pulling threads from the world, like they're tugging at something that doesn't belong to them." He grimaced. "And it makes me want to stop them." "Not yet," Seren said. "You're not ready." He exhaled hard. "You say that often." "That is because it is often true." A faint light glimmered at the end of the passage. The tunnel opened into a cavern with a high ceiling and ancient mining rails half buried in rubble. Water dripped somewhere unseen. Kaelen stepped beside her. "So this is how miners got into the mountain?" "Yes," Seren said. "Before the aether storms grew too unpredictable. Most abandoned the tunnels." "They feel abandoned," Kaelen murmured. "Empty, but echoing." Seren lit a small orb of mage light at the tip of her staff. The glow cast long, angular shadows across the cavern. "We need to cross this chamber. The exit is on the far side." Kaelen took 2 steps, and the cavern trembled. Seren reacted instantly, grabbing his arm and pulling him back as a jagged crack split the floor where he'd stood. Dust billowed upward. Kaelen coughed. "Is that normal?" "No," Seren said, heart pounding. "That was forced." As if in answer, a voice echoed from the shadows. "Cold, controlled, Keeper Arvale." Seren's blood ran cold. Octavian Run stepped into the mage light, his silver armor catching the glow. His expression was impassive, but his eyes, storm gray, were sharp as blades. Kaelen stiffened beside her. Heat rippled under his skin before the amulet dampened it back down. Seren tightened her grip on her staff. "You have no right to cross into Dawncrest's territory." "I cross where Drevenor commands," Octavian replied. His gaze flicked to Kaelen. "The runaway flame. You are less impressive than expected." Kaelen bristled. "And you're exactly what I expected." Octavian ignored him. "Surrender him. Do so peacefully, Seren, and I will ensure the Keeper Order survives this trespass without consequence." Seren stepped in front of Kaelen. "He is under my protection." Octavian tilted his head slightly. "A curious choice. Keeper oaths typically bind you to a winged creature of legend, not a half-formed boy." Kaelen flinched, anger sparking. Seren didn't let him move. You know nothing of this rebirth. I know enough. Octavian lifted a device, a siphon cylinder engraved with black glyphs. Its hollow core pulsed hungrily. Your phoenix is weakened, his essence fractured. He will be easier to contain than previous cycles. Seren's stomach twisted. Drevenor did know. Kaelen stepped forward. You'll have to go through her. Octavian's eyes fixed on him. That is the idea. He thrust the siphon forward. Dark energy surged from it, whipping toward Kaelen like a tether. Seren reacted with pure instinct, slamming her staff down and weaving a shield glyph. A shimmering barrier flared to life, catching the siphon's tendrils. The impact shook her to her core. Kaelen reached for her, steadying her. Their palms met, and their bond snapped awake like a struck cord. Magic roared between them. A gush of warmth surged from Kaelen into Seren, bolstering her shield. Colors shimmered across the barrier, gold and blue, flame and ice light mingling. But Octavian's siphon only intensified.
Fascinating, he murmured. A shared reservoir. Seren realized with a jolt of fear their connection wasn't just emotional, it was magical. Kaelen's grip tightened. Seren, let me help. You already are, she said through clenched teeth. The cavern shook harder. Debris fell from above. The siphon's tendrils cracked the barrier. Seren felt her strength falter, just as Kaelen stepped past her. Kaelen! He thrust his hand forward, instinct overriding caution. A gout of flame burst from his palm, uncontrolled, raw. It struck the ground at Octavian's feet, sending him skidding back. But Kaelen cried out the instant the fire left him, clutching his chest. His knees buckled. Seren caught him before he fell. His skin flickered with unstable light. Too much, he gasped. I can't. Octavian rose from the dust, unfazed. Yes, he said calmly. Burn yourself out, little phoenix. Make my task effortless. Seren glared at him. You will not touch him. Octavian lifted his siphon again. That was when the cavern's ceiling split. A jagged fracture tore downward, showering rock. Seren threw herself over Kaelen as boulders crashed around them. The shockwave knocked Octavian off balance, forcing him back into the shadows. Seren dragged Kaelen behind a cluster of fallen rock. Move! Can you move? Kaelen struggled upright. I think so. They scrambled toward the far passage. The ground heaved again as the Aetherflow buckled. Octavian's voice echoed through the chaos. You cannot run forever, Keeper. Seren didn't look back. They plunged into the winding passage just as the cavern behind them collapsed completely, sealing the hunters off, for now. Only once the rumbling quieted did Seren allow herself to stop and breathe. Kaelen leaned heavily against the tunnel wall, sweat beading on his brow. The amulet flickered weakly. I shouldn't have used fire, he said hoarsely. I felt it tearing me apart. Seren touched his shoulder gently. You saved us. I might have doomed myself. She met his gaze, steady despite the ache in her bones. I will not let that happen. Something unspoken passed between them. Worry, gratitude, fear, and something warmer beneath it. Kaelen swallowed. When we fought, our magic connected. I felt you. Seren looked away, pulse quickening. The bond is growing. Is that dangerous? Yes, she whispered, but losing you is worse. Kaelen's breath caught. They stood there, the tunnel quiet around them, their closeness almost electric. Then Seren straightened. We keep moving. Octavian won't give up. Kaelen nodded. Then neither will I. They set off deeper into the winding dark, both shaken, both changed, both aware that something between them had shifted, subtle but undeniable. And the path ahead promised only greater danger and greater closeness. The wind tunnels sloped downward in a twisting maze, each turn colder and darker than the last. Seren led with her staff light held high, the soft glow illuminating narrow walls and glittering mineral veins that caught the light like shattered starlight. Kaelen stayed close enough behind her that she could feel the faint warmth radiating from him even through the damp chill of the tunnels. His steps were slower than earlier, still steady, still driven, but tinged with fatigue. The amulet around his neck flickered in unsteady pulses. They had escaped Arctavian, but only barely, and Seren knew the collapse behind them would not stop Drevenar for long. "We'll be safe once we reach the aether chambers beneath the western ridge," she said quietly. Kaelen gave a humorless huff. "Your definition of safe isn't reassuring. It is the most honesty I can offer." "I know," he murmured, "and I appreciate it." There was something in his voice, something softer, something she was beginning to recognize, something she was afraid of and drawn to in equal measure. They continued deeper until the tunnel widened into a vast subterranean chamber. Luminescent moss clung to the walls, casting ghostly blue light. In the center stretched a pool of still water, perfectly smooth, its surface reflecting the cavern like polished glass. Kaelen stepped toward it. "What is this place?" "A dormant aether pool," Seren said. "It forms when a ridge stabilizes magic but draws no spells. Harmless, usually." Kaelen knelt beside the pool, peering at his reflection, his ember gold eyes, his copper-threaded hair, the faint glow under his skin. He looked both enchanted and troubled. "That's me," he said softly, almost to himself. "But not me. I feel like I'm looking at a stranger wearing my face." Seren approached him slowly. "Your memories will return." He shook his head. "I'm not sure I want all of them." Seren's breath caught. "Why?" Kaelen looked up at her, firelight flickering behind his eyes. "Because I'm afraid of who I'll be when they do. I'm afraid that version of me won't be someone who—" He broke off, jaw tightening. "Who feels what I feel now." Seren swallowed, the chamber suddenly too quiet. "What do you feel now?" she asked before she could stop herself. Kaelen hesitated, unguarded, vulnerable. "Connected," he said finally. "To you. Like your anchor and gravity and something I'm meant to protect." He gave a weak laugh. "Even though you've saved me far more than I've helped you." Seren's heart thudded painfully. Their bond thrummed between them, alive and undeniable. "That is the bond speaking," she said, but even to her own ears it sounded thin. "No," Kaelen whispered, "it's me." "Or the human part of me." He reached toward her as if drawn. "I don't want to lose that." Seren stepped back too quickly, her breath shaking. "We must not let it deepen. Erwin warned—" "I know," Kaelen said quietly, "but that doesn't stop it from happening." Silence settled over them like a fragile veil. Before Seren could reply, the Aetherflow shuddered violently beneath them. A shock wave whippled through the cavern, so strong that the water of the pool lifted in a trembling dome before collapsing back into itself. Seren's grip tightened on her staff. That was close. Kaelen staggered, clutching his chest. Light flared under his skin again, uncontrolled, painful. "Kaelen? I'm fine," he managed, though he clearly wasn't. Then a sharp crack echoed from the tunnel behind them. Footsteps followed. Seren spun. Arctavian runes stepped into the cavern, armor scorched from the earlier collapse, but intact. Behind him, 2 more Drevenorian hunters fanned out, siphon blades drawn and shimmering with darkened glyphs. Seren's chest tightened. "Kaelen, stay behind me." Kaelen rose, breath shaky. "Seren, behind me." He obeyed, though his eyes flashed bright gold, fire straining beneath the amulet's dampening. Arctavian assessed the cavern, gaze lingering on Seren, then Kaelen. "Cornered in a dead end," he said calmly.
A stronger trap than I anticipated. We are not trapped, Seren replied. You're outnumbered, Octavian said. Seren's expression didn't change. I have been outnumbered before. Octavian lifted his siphon cylinder again. Submit, and I will grant you mercy. Kaelen's fire surged, cracking the amulet's fragile balance. Seren threw her arm out to stop him. No, you'll destroy yourself. Kaelen's entire body trembled. I can't. Seren, I can't let them take you. I won't. Your fire is unstable. If you fight now, you will burn out your human form. Octavian watched them with interest. So, the creature's emotions weaken him. Noted. Kaelen snarled softly. Seren stepped forward. Your quarrel is with me. Let him go. Octavian's eyes narrowed. Your bond is deeper than a keeper's oath should allow. He turned to Kaelen. Does she truly mean so much to you, even without memory? Kaelen's voice cracked. Yes. The word hung in the cavern like a struck bell. Octavian's expression hardened. Then you will watch her fall. He thrust the siphon forward. The cavern erupted into chaos. Dark energy whipped toward Seren like a spear of shadow. She barely raised her shield in time. The impact hurled her back, slamming her against the cavern wall. Pain exploded through her ribcage. Kaelen screamed her name. His fire surged in a blinding wave and shattered the amulet.
Light burst from him uncontrolled, golden flames licking the air. The hunters staggered back, but Kaelen buckled, collapsing to his knees as if the fire inside him scorched him from within. Kaelen! Seren forced herself upright, ignoring the white-hot pain in her ribs. He was shaking violently, his skin flickering like a candle flame in a storm. Seren, I can't. I'm losing. His eyes glowed too brightly. His chest heaved. His magic spiraled out of control. He is destabilizing, Octavian observed coldly. The perfect moment to extract him. Seren moved faster than thought. She dropped to her knees beside Kaelen, cupping his face in both hands. He gasped at the touch, fire surging toward her, but instead of burning her, it flowed into her like warmth returning to frozen limbs. Their bond trembled, then locked. Look at me, Seren whispered. Kaelen's breath shuddered. I can't hold. Seren, I'm not strong enough. You are, she said firmly. You hold the balance of the realm. You survived rebirth. You endured instability no phoenix has ever faced. She pressed her forehead lightly to his. His fire steadied, just slightly, but not enough. Seren felt the truth in her bones. He could not anchor himself alone. His magic was too fractured, too human and immortal at once. Only one thing could stabilize him. The forbidden vow. Keeper's vow. A bonding ritual meant only for Phoenix and Keeper, never meant to be invoked while the Phoenix was weakened or confused. It linked life heat, magic, and fate. It bound them in ways no Keeper had dared since ancient times. It could save Kaelen, or destroy them both. Kaelen's breath hitched. Seren, what are you doing? Seren's hands trembled as she placed her scarred wrist over his heart. Forgive me, she whispered. Then she spoke the words. By flame and balance, by oath and breath, my life heat to yours, my strength to your fire, my will to your wings, bound until the balance holds. Golden light flared from her scar, racing across her skin into Kaelen's body. He cried out, not in pain, but in something like release. Their magic collided, then intertwined, two forces merging like sun and horizon.
Kaelen's fire steadied, warming instead of burning. His eyes, still bright but no longer blinding, locked onto hers in stunned disbelief. "Seren," he whispered, "why would you risk?" "Because I will not lose you," she breathed, her voice barely a sound. Octavian staggered back, shielding his eyes. "Impossible," he snarled. "The Keeper's vow is forbidden. It cannot work on a fractured phoenix." Seren stood slowly, helping Kaelen rise with her. He stood straighter, stronger, still trembling, but anchored. Stabilized by her presence, by the bond they now shared, not just emotionally, but magically, irrevocably.
Octavian recovered quickly, rage twisting his features. "You have sealed your fate, both of you." Kaelen stepped forward, gold flames curling around his fingers. Controlled, focused. His voice was quiet, but deeper, resonant. "No," he said. "She has sealed my strength." Octavian lunged. Kaelen moved to meet him. Seren followed. The cavern filled with the clash of magic, Drevenorian shadow against Phoenix fire, Keeper spellwork woven with something new, something neither of them could have anticipated, but both felt down to their marrow. Together, they drove Octavian and his hunters back, forcing them into retreat deeper into the tunnels. Only when the last echo faded did Kaelen sag slightly, breath shaking. Seren caught him at once. Their foreheads brushed in the aftermath of battle, both silent, both trembling from more than exertion. Kaelen whispered, "You bound yourself to me." Seren's voice was barely audible. "To save you." He searched her face, slowly, deeply. "And if it binds our lives?" Her heart pounded. "Then we will live them, together." Kaelen exhaled shakily, emotion flickering through his gold-flecked eyes. He leaned into her touch, not a kiss, not yet, but something just as intimate. A vow returned for a vow given. "Seren," he murmured, "I won't let that sacrifice be for nothing." She held him, letting his warmth seep into her bones. But as they stood in the quiet cavern, bonded, alive, and changed, the Aetherflow trembled again. Stronger. Worse. Far above them, the world was beginning to break. Soon, they would face the final confrontation together, bound by fire, oath, and something deeper neither dared yet name. The tremor rippled through the tunnel walls, stronger than any before, an ominous warning from the Aetherflow itself. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Fissures cracked along the stone floor like lightning frozen in place. Kaelen stiffened beside Seren. "That wasn't Drevenor," he murmured. "That felt worse." "It is the Aetherflow destabilizing," Seren said, pulse quickening. "Your rebirth disrupted the balance, and now the strain of combat has worsened it." Kaelen's gaze met hers, steady and resolute despite the exhaustion tugging at his features. "Then we have to fix it before the whole mountain collapses." Seren nodded. "The central stabilization chamber lies ahead. If we can reach it." A distant shout cut through the tunnels. "Octavian." "We're running out of time." Kaelen reached for her hand without hesitation. "Come on." Seren didn't question the gesture. Their fingers interlaced naturally, energy flowing between them in warm pulses, steady, supportive, familiar. They ran together through twisting stone corridors as the mountain groaned around them. The tunnel spit them out into a massive cavern shaped like a hollowed geode. Prismatic stone walls glittered in fractured patterns, and in the center lay a circular dais etched with ancient glyphs, the heart of the Aetherflow's stabilization. But the dais was cracked. Worse still, a jagged rift split the chamber floor, glowing with wild, spiraling light. Strands of chaotic aether whipped upward like living threads. Kaelen flinched as the uncontrolled magic brushed his skin. "It's tearing itself apart."
Seren tightened her grip on his hand. "We can repair it. The Phoenix's presence is part of the stabilizing mechanism. If you focus your fire into the central glyph." Octavian's voice roared from the tunnel behind them. "You will not leave this chamber alive!" Kaelen spun just as the Drevenorian hunter burst in, armor gleaming with siphoned power. 2 more hunters followed, flanking him. Seren stepped in front of Kaelen, staff raised. "You will not touch him." Octavian's expression twisted. "You have already sealed your fate, Keeper. The vow will drain you dry." Kaelen's voice hardened. "Then I'll make sure we take you with us." He stepped forward, and Seren grabbed his sleeve. "No, if you unleash too much fire now, the chamber will collapse. I need you at the glyph. I will hold them off." Kaelen stared at her as if she'd said something unthinkable. "It is the only way." "You're bound to me." His voice shook. "If you fall, I fall." "Then trust I will not fall," she said softly. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other. Fire and resolve, duty and tenderness, something warm and fragile flickering between them. Then Kaelen nodded, jaw set. "Don't die," he whispered. "I will not," she replied. He ran toward the dais. Seren turned to face Octavian and the hunters, raising her staff. The glyphs carved into her wrist flared with golden light, Kaelen's fire merging with her magic through the bond. "You should have joined Drevenor," Octavian snarled, lifting his siphon blade. "I have made my choice," Seren replied, "and my vow." They clashed. Dark siphon magic slammed into Seren's shield, sparks scattering like scorching embers. She countered with a slicing arc of aether thread, her movements sharper and more fluid than ever, Kaelen's strength pulsing through her veins. The bond amplified her, but it also linked their pain. Behind her, Kaelen reached the cracked dais. He knelt and pressed both hands to the central glyph. His fire flared, steady, controlled, spreading through the fissures like molten gold. The rift pulsed violently. Kaelen gasped, sweat beading on his brow. "Seren, it's resisting me." Seren parried a spear strike, gritting her teeth. "Keep going." Octavian lunged again, his siphon blade slicing the air. Seren dodged and struck back with a burst of life heat. One hunter fell, then the next.
But Octavian was stronger, fueled by siphoned power. He feinted left and struck right, catching Seren across the ribs. Pain seared through her, and Kaelen cried out at the same instant, collapsing on the dais as their shared bond transmitted the wound. "Seren!" he gasped. She staggered, one hand pressed to her side, but she did not fall. "You cannot win," Octavian growled. "You're weakened, bound, on borrowed strength." Seren lifted her staff, breath trembling. "Yes," she said, "but I am not alone." The bond flared, hot, bright, unbreakable. Kaelen forced himself upright, hands still pressed to the glyph. Golden fire surged through the cracked dais, flooding the chamber with blazing light. The rift shrieked as its edges pulled inward, slowly closing. Octavian shielded his eyes. "Impossible! What power is this?" Seren advanced. "The power of the Phoenix," she said, "and the Keeper who stands beside him." Octavian lunged one last time. Seren met him head-on. Her staff collided with his siphon blade. For a heartbeat, their magics clashed in a blinding explosion of dark and gold. The blow shattered Octavian's weapon and hurled him backward across the chamber, unconscious. Silence fell. Only the crackling hum of sealing aether remained. Kaelen sagged as the rift sealed completely, its last flickers of chaos dissolving into harmless motes of light. He collapsed to his knees. Seren ran to him. He lifted his head as she knelt beside him, his breathing ragged and uneven. Did we do it?" "You did it," she whispered, brushing a shaking hand along his cheek. "You restored the balance." His gold-flecked eyes locked onto hers. "We did it," he corrected gently. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling, the warm glow of the bond pulsing between them like a steady heartbeat. The danger had passed, but the vow remained. Kaelen lowered his voice. "Seren, will this bond hurt you?" She shook her head slowly. "No, it strengthens both of us, because we chose it." Kaelen exhaled, relief softening the tension in his shoulders. "Then what now?" Seren looked toward the sealed rift, the quiet chamber, the fallen hunters. "Now the phoenix lives," she said. "Not as a creature above the world, but as someone who walks beside it." Kaelen reached for her hand. "And beside you." Her heart stuttered. She met his gaze fully, no walls left to hide behind. "If that is where you wish to be." Kaelen's fingers intertwined with hers. "There's nowhere else I would want." A warmth bloomed through their bond, gentle, bright, steady. A promise, newly formed and wholly theirs. Together they rose. Light filtered down from a crack far above, soft and golden, illuminating the chamber like dawn breaking after a long night. Seren stood at Kaelen's side, keeper and phoenix, bound not by duty alone, but by choice. And with the balance restored, they began the long journey upward, toward the world, toward whatever future awaited them, and toward a dawn neither would face alone. Hand in hand, bound in vow, and walking forward together.